Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to move up to the big guns, to Companion itself. And I'm going to show you how to install it into a VPS and get it up and running. The settings and configuration page on the wiki is a top-down point of reference that will help you go through everything you need to get your bot up and running and to get everything done right. So as we read it, before you begin the installation process, make sure you have your Discord token. And for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to use an OpenAI token. You can use a llama, Together, Cohere, whatever you wish for your preferred AI provider. But for this demonstration, it's going to be OpenAI. The model itself doesn't make any difference really in terms of the practical applications of what I'm going to demonstrate. So without any further ado, let's get to one of the more difficult parts, in that it can be confusing, but it shouldn't be. And that is getting your Discord server ID. If you've followed this series along, you will already have a working Discord server, and you will be able to get the ID from that server. There is references within the wiki that show where to get this information, but I'm going to show you a quick and easy way from the server that we've played with in the previous videos. So simply click on the title and then scroll down to the very bottom and you will see copy server ID. Copy this into a clipboard or some kind of a text document, someplace safe, because you're going to be using it quite a lot throughout this process. So now that we have this copied, it's going to make your job a lot easier. So let's go back to the wiki and let's proceed with the instructions that we need to begin the installation process. So go down through the document at least once, reading every detail. And then we will get to the part that we need, the installation and setup. So let's start with the actual instructions we need to copy. This will install Companion onto our VPS. Now you should have a VPS dedicated just to Companion, and it doesn't take a lot of resources. So a $5 or $10 VPS is more than enough to provide you with good, reliable services. So let's copy the instructions and then go to our VPS. In our VPS, you're going to want to create some kind of a folder that you can store your files in. I prefer Home GitHub as an easy way for me to organize my files and know what I'm doing. But it can really be anything you want for this part. You're going to paste those instructions you just copied from the wiki. Now, my software is a tablet-based system, so it has a slightly different approach than a Windows or Mac, which would be just simply a Control-V. So now that we have copied the files, the repository is cloned onto the VPS. Now we simply need to install a working version. And that is simply running the install command, but from the right directory. So you need to change into Companion and then run the install. And it will install all of the libraries and modules necessary for Companion to run properly. This system is designed so that it will work on a VPS and it expects to be the only thing running. The weakest link isn't going to be the software you're installing, it's going to be something you never expected. So you should always run Companion in an isolated VPS by itself. Do not share other services with Companion. So now it is going through and making sure everything is needed and installed properly onto this server. And here we have a large list of modules and libraries being installed. And you're going to see that it's going to complain about having root access and being a root user and breaking system configurations. This is all why you need a separate VPS. Do not run this with other software. So we're done. We are fully installed. Now let's go to our main Companion folder. Okay, in Home Companion, this is where everything gets installed. All of our files are here. Everything we need except, of course, the Discord token file and our settings to get our server up and running. But that's the easy part. Now that we are back at the wiki, we can begin moving forward. Be sure to read everything so that you understand all of the details. Because at this point, all of this is installed. But we need to begin the configuration process. And the most important part of the configuration is your Discord tokens. And that is in the Companion Tokens file under the main Home Companion folder. This is where you put your Discord token. Now you can copy this blueprint as needed, or you can simply just key it in and copy and paste it from your notes that you saved this information earlier from. This is required. Without this, you can't even start the program. So let's go back to the VPS and I will install my tokens. I have just installed my Discord token, as we can now see the file in my list. Do not give your Discord token out ever, for any reason. Protect your token just as you would a password. Next, we're going to begin the process of actually setting up our server. Okay, from here, we keep reading and doing what things are said. Now, we get a lot of information here, and it's important that you take your time because this is rather dense. Pay attention to this link because it will help you in going further after you've gotten the main system set up. From the standpoint of what we're doing next, though, the initial configuration needs to be this folder and directory that we're going to have to create. The numbers are that server ID you copied earlier. That is very important, as I said, and it's going to get used a lot. So first we need to create the folders and then the server ID.cfg file, and to begin building that actual file. So let's start with just creating the directory. Okay, I have pieced together everything from the wiki, including the server ID that is my server. We're going to create the configuration file. So let's talk about this command. We're going to make the directory, then the -p. This is a neat little trick in Linux that lets you create any folder that is missing automatically so you don't have to go one by one. Since this is a new installation, we don't have the servers, we don't have the config folder, and we don't have the server ID folder. So all three folders are going to be created at once for us as soon as we press return. This really makes it nice and easy to get things done. So, enter done. The folders are set and done and created. So now, let's modify this command and let's change into the folder we just created. And as we can see, nothing is here. Now we need to make our first configuration file. Discord does provide an article that makes it a little easier or gives you a better description of your server ID, and that is on the wiki as well. But now that we've got that done, let's continue reading through the wiki and find out what our next step is. Explanations of the main configuration file, and then we get to an example. This is a rather complicated example, but I have provided examples that you can use in the repository itself. So we're going to use one of those examples to start with. So we're going to go back to the repository, back to your VPS. Now there's two ways of going about this. You can either do it the long way and type in commands, which is perfectly fine if you're comfortable with that. And you'll get a list of various examples from various services you can follow. Or if you have a file manager on your system, then you can go through and use that file manager. That is exactly what I'm going to do. I use Midnight Commander, so we're going to actually go in and do just that. So we're going to stay here in this folder. Then we're going to have it bring up in a side panel the configuration examples. So we're in the current folder of my server. And we have the various example configurations of what we want to use. Nice and simple. And we can very easily handle a large number of situations. So I'm going to quickly create this file for us, and then I will be right back. Okay, I have created 3 files. The actual server configuration file, and I chose a very simple approach. The default is the AI persona I want to use. For the purposes of my test server, the moderation area is the only channel I have in the server. And then, of course, the channel's references is the model that I want running in that server, on that channel. Very simple, very easy, nice, direct approach to build something to actually demonstrate. The tokens file. This is where your actual AI tokens go. Only use the tokens you actually have registered. And we'll go back to the wiki in a few minutes to demonstrate that process. From the examples configurations, I created the basic file I wanted to use. You don't have to be this elaborate. You can use any of the sample engines you want from any of those configurations. And let's go back and actually go in and find a simple one. For example, if you're going to be using Olama, then your overmind.cfg is going to have these instructions. Now, there is one thing that has to be pointed out right here. You have to have an image server. Discord requires that when you use images, you serve them on your own server. So you will need to get that to set up your companion. But overall, as you can see, the configuration can be as simple or as complex as you want. This really is a very easy process. Whether it's Olama or as my own example is going to use, let's go with something very simple. A very simple open AI approach. It really is that simple. All of these items are explained on the wiki. So now we are going to return to the wiki to talk more about this aspect. This is the exact example the wiki shows. It's an elaborate example, but you don't need to be this complicated right away. But there are things here that are important to pay attention to. For example, the default. That is the default AI persona that runs across the server when you don't have one explicit to a channel. The welcome persona, that's how you welcome people to the server. Moderation area. As I said earlier, this is where all the moderation comments go to. Now, a lot of this stuff here is described up here. Take the time to read it carefully so you can see if it's appropriate to your server or not. A lot of it is quite complex, and you can really build a generous system. But for the purposes of this example, I'm only focusing on what we are actually using. And then, of course, the channels. The channels describes the channel name and then the actual AI persona for that channel. Yes, each channel can have its own AI persona, which makes it very unique and interesting. You can build a very robust framework with this system. It seems complicated, and I know we've done a lot of back and forth, but it really isn't complicated at all. Now we get down to the tokens part that I described in my server. Your services that you actually use. Only put what you actually use in this configuration. You don't need all of it. And if you're using only Olama, Olama does not have an API key, but you still have to have the link reference because someday it might. Or you might be able to, or want to build one for your own personal system. And it's not that hard. So that linkage has to still be there. But keep going down and read everything in detail. Because really, at this point, once you've done your setups, you have a working server. The last thing you need to do is decide, do you start it up manually, or do you put it in your cron tab and reboot your server? Or do you do both? Put it in the cron tab and then start it manually. Both work out well. At this point, you actually have a fully working server. So let's go back to the VPS and demonstrate that. So now that we are back at the VPS server, we need to start Companion up. And that is with the simple launcher. Now I'm doing this from the console so I can see diagnostics, startups, and everything necessary to make the bot run properly. To make sure I did everything correctly. Because yes, typos do happen, and they can be very hard to find when you have such a complex system. And at this point, we have a working server. It is up and running and doing wonderful. So now let's go to our Discord server and actually test it. Okay, in our Discord server, once you started the bot, and it's going to go through and do a lot of things, your test server or main server is going to have a new channel. And all of this will be discussed in a future video. But for now, we're simply going to take and see if our bot works. So let's just type something in and see if it works and doesn't break. It should take about a minute, and we will see something when we go back to the VPS to determine. Now, we have a response. We have a working bot. It seems confusing at first, but going through the steps as I just did in this video, it's very easy. So let's go back to the VPS server and actually see the outcome. Back at the VPS server, we see the diagnostics that has been completed. We see, for example, the server ID, and then we see the channel. We see the automated sections for the slowdown mode, a feature that the bot does to maintain control as part of the anti-raid system built into it, where it keeps track of users and rough expectations of what it should be capable of doing. We see where it connected to the AI model that we wanted. And then none over here is special encoding. There's no special encoding on this, so we're fine. The bot response, the channel, and then of course the length of the response. Now most importantly, this bot does a lot of timings as I try to optimize it as much as possible. So you see how long that request took with the API model. Sometimes some models can easily take a minute or more. Some models are fast, some models are slow. But at this point, we have a fully working bot. So now let's get down to the really second part of this video, the personas. For this part of the video, I'm going to show you my full working server, the one that runs multiple situations and handles a lot of details. So it's a lot more complex, but it demonstrates some of the more critical elements that I think are important for you to understand in building your server. So if you go into the servers section, you're going to see the main three regions. We're going to go to the configuration. Now I run 4 different servers. And I should say I have this bot connected to 4 different servers. So you see all 4 servers here. Don't try this unless you are 1, crazy, or 2, a glutton for punishment, because it can get very confusing very quickly. But nonetheless, if you do have more than 1 server, you can have just 1 bot help control and moderate. We're going to go down to my big server. So you see my primary configuration. It is complex, but it is very simple at the same time. You can go out of your way to really demonstrate just what you want your server to be. Remember your tokens, never expose them, ever. But let's get down to some of the configurations and see just how robust you can make your system. So here is my primary Koikai configuration. It is using OpenAI and it is using the 4.0 mini model. I have this scattered throughout the system. Now it is important to understand and remember to always pay attention to the details. Now, Discord does allow not safe for work content. That does not mean necessarily lewd, adult, or any of that content. That can cover topics and situations that are simply not suitable for children. Make sure you pay close attention to Discord's terms and conditions. But you also have to make sure you understand the terms and conditions of the AI model you use. Because not every model allows adult-oriented or difficult topics. So you must understand exactly what those models are and allow. It is a complicated and difficult process. But pay attention to the details. If a channel deals with subject matter that Discord says needs to be age restricted, then you have to flag it as NSFW, no matter what the content is. The same holds true with respect to the AI service you are using. You must make sure you follow your terms and services appropriately. And you can see in this case, I have 2 different server configurations. The primary one that overrides everything for the channels it's allowed in. And it's a complex layering that allows multiple models as fallbacks. So if one model isn't available, then it will go to the second model, and so forth. Again, you can build in a very robust system. But then you can also pick specific to a single channel so that a given channel can have its own configuration different from the main model. And we can see here that for this channel, I am using the Cohere model versus the Open Router model for the main initiation of the Overmind persona. It is that robust. And that carries on for any and every model you have available. Same thing with Yago. I have one model for Yago, which is OpenAI. But then when I want to use it specifically in this testing channel, I have a second model. This is how you begin to build the depth of your server on the basis of the channels. But now let's go into the personas and talk about what exactly is a persona and how that connects to the entire process. And I have covered personas in previous videos, but I'm going to talk about this today in the context of the bigger picture of Companion itself. So in the personas folders, you have all of the personas that you can use. Now you can create your own persona and add it here, simply by giving it a name, creating a folder, and then going through and actually building on it. Let's take Yago, a very simple persona that I talked about in the previous video of being a Yoda-like entity that refers and speaks in a Victorian dialect. Now the configurations, if you see them in the persona, they are strictly examples. All configurations must be in the configuration folder. So let's go down to the actual system role. What makes this persona a persona? And it's simply put, the instructions. You are literally giving instructions to the AI as you build your persona. I have found the best way to get the AI model to respond to what I want it to is to treat it like an actor. And I tell it what its role is, what its performance is going to be. So I prefer framing all of the instructions as you or your, as I'm talking to the language model itself, telling it what it is going to be and do. So since I demonstrated the Overmind model in my playground server, let's go look at it. And you can see very easily just how complicated various aspects will always be, or could be. This is really no limit except your imagination. You can build anything you want out of this, literally. Don't be afraid to create a directory and play around with it. Back up your work, create a copy of it. That way, if something goes wrong, you can always restore your working system. But here is where the fun really begins, and you can begin to explore the depth of your imagination. Companion is a fun little way to bring depth to your server. And hopefully through this video and showing you just how easy it is to configure, you will be up and running in a matter of no time. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Please visit the support server and play with the models that I have up and running and visible. I do add personas to the repository regularly. So if you have a persona you want to share, feel free to share it for the repository. Thank you for watching. And until next time.